Welcome to Middle Fingers Up. I am your host, Kieran. And maybe I just want to start with saying, I've had the privilege of doing this podcast, this passion project for 3.5 years now. And the thing that I am so grateful for is that every guest that I sit down with helps me expand my own critical thinking, helps me challenge some things. Maybe I'm stuck in some ways. And the timing is always just symbolic to what's been going on and maybe the world I'm in. And, I've noticed in the last 3.5 years, we keep coming to some particularly specific topics. And I guess I've had versions of today's conversation before. And what really excites me is that every time we have a conversation like today's, it keeps unfolding in new ways. And I think for us humans on this lifespan, part of our goal in life is to tap into that window of self-awareness, that area where we just don't know a whole lot about ourselves. And I think it's a scary area. I think it's a risky area. I think there's lots of things to exploring that area where we don't know who we are. And the best way to do it is not by confirmation bias, but by inviting and opening doors to new kinds of possibilities. And this is why we keep having the kind of conversation we're going to have today, because I think part of why we keep coming back to today's topic is maybe I've been thinking a lot about this. Maybe it's because there's just so little language and honestly not enough research for what it means to grow up for us kids of immigrants. I think people are becoming more brave. I think people are starting to question the questioning. I think people like our guest today are helping push the envelope and ask the things that maybe some of us are like, oh my goodness, yes, this is what's happening in my world. I keep coming back to this idea that there have been many of us that were taught to be good, to be obedient, to follow, but not nearly enough of us were taught how to be heard, how to expand our critical thinking, how to maybe even trust that gut, that intuition that happens. And so the part of all of that I think a lot about as a mother myself is, what does that do to us over time? How does that follow us, the gaps and the things that we didn't get as we evolve as adults, and especially as those adults that maybe are parenting our own kids? There's always truth to there being multiple truths. So it's not just one thing. Many things can exist at the same time. So for us kids of immigrants, our parents were in new territory, exploring their own journey as immigrants and paving the ways they were going. And we as children were in our own journey, figuring it out, what it was to grow up in a world that maybe our parents didn't grow up in. And so that was happening at the same time. And I think what we have to keep in mind here is that even though we have a lot of empathy and appreciation for either our parents or they do for us, the truth of the matter is there's a lot of unfinished business that carries out as we become adults. And that shows up in all these different relational patterns, whether it be with our partners, whether it be in the workplace, and whether it just be when our own identity is evolving and growing. So today's guest is going to help us unpack a lot of this, is going to help us talk about these things. And we have Patty. We have Patty here. Patty's a psychologist, an Indian psychologist, which is amazing for those of us that in the South Asian world have people like Patty who are dedicating their time and their education and their knowledge to the human experience, parts of the human experience that maybe we don't always focus on, but probably should a little bit more. Patty's also a writer. So she's currently working on a book that's going to explore the inner worlds of us kids of immigrants. What kind of things come up, the the silent negotiations, the inherited experiences, and then, like I said, those psychological patterns that keep shaping how we move through those relationships, work, and identity. Her work is getting into sort of those, I would say, emotional undercurrents. Many of us may not have learned how to name, but we can feel it. It's happening. So like, how is all my years of childhood guilt coming out as an adult now? What does having been obedient all my life mean to me now as an adult? How am I processing shame in my body and in my mind? These are just like a few examples of what many of us have talked about, not even on the podcast, but in our life, we're exploring that. And there's ... like so many more of those kinds of patterns and experiences we've had as kiddos of immigrants. And again, these things don't just stay in our childhood, right? They show up. They show up in all sorts of parts of our world. And again, I'm excited to have Patty talk about that and also learn about Patty. Patty has been herself in an interracial relationship. She's also held responsibility and accountability as an Indian mom raising 2 biracial daughters in the US, and what kind of complexities come with that navigation. So as we get into today, I'm already going to tell you what I'm really appreciating is that conversations like this are not about staying in the past, but like, okay, what do we do now moving forward? How do we expand? And not just for myself, but also for the future generations. What can we leave behind as a community that's just starting to explore some of these deep-seated experiences and patterns? So I'll leave it at that, and I will welcome our wonderful guest, Patty. Thank you for being here with me today. How you doing? I said a lot.
I'm good, and thank you so much for this. I love connecting this way and having real conversations about this, because it's like we're supposed to be so quiet about so many things. And so it's like on one hand, it's like education, it's psychology, but it's just like how we experience life. The other side of it being, though, that like we're not supposed to talk about any of these things, right? Like there's like so much taboo, and like you have like the image of community, like the whole they in the back of your mind, whoever the hell they are. And so it's just kind of just breaking that apart, freeing ourselves. It's just, and every conversation I have with like each lovely person, it's like, that's what we're doing. And I think like that's what you do too, and you created an environment for that. So like, thank you for having me on. Thank you for doing this. Just, yeah, really excited.
I feel the same. So thank you for that. We're tackling the same kind of stuff in different ways. And here we are, we meet. We met on the socials, which is like the newest way of meeting people. You know, I always say it's no longer in the grocery stores or out on the street. We meet through social media, and you pose a lot of interesting questions on threads. You get people talking, and I read some of those, and that's how I met you. I read some of the responses from so many people of color, and it's not just South Asians, it's all different diverse cultural backgrounds, and it's always interesting how people's experiences are. And when you read that, as you collect your data, you see, okay, like it's not just one thing. There's a common thread in a lot of the answers, but everyone has their own experience. And I think sometimes as people of color, we kind of get put in one boat, one category, and this is how all of our experiences are. And that's not entirely true. And I think the fact that you've opened the door to saying, hey, let's go there, you get a flux of people responding back and saying, yeah, I do want to go there. So I'm going to go there with you. But where I'm going to start with you, it's kind of turned into like a common now ritual question that just seems to make sense, which is if I had you get into a time machine with me today and go back to your own upbringing, your own past, I'm curious, what age would you go back and visit yourself? And what would you go back and tell her at that age, knowing what you know now?
I love this question. Well, thank you for asking it. It's kind of funny, like asking a psychologist questions.
Yeah.
Like, oh my gosh, no, I asked the questions, but this is a great.
Yeah.
So I would go back to just before my teen years. I think, I wanted to initially say teen years because like that was when, that was the crossroads. That was when it got really, really real with me and my parents. Prior to that, I was like, obedient. I was the good girl. I was like, they made me go to church. They made me like, put on all the clothes and like all the things. But I think if I could go back just a little bit before that to say, hey, around 11, 12, maybe, to say like, you do have a voice. And the small ways, like the insidious ways where our voice is kind of like quieted, especially with girls, how it's like, oh, well, your opinion doesn't necessarily matter. Or, okay, that's cool, but like, we're going to do it this way. And like
Mm.
little ways that like you start to feel forced to do these things that are then, then there's the full blown. And I think like I find that like different people handle like conflict with their parents differently in like South Asian families and immigrant families in general, because there's like, oh, we sacrificed so much for you, and like, why are you doing this to us? As like teenagers start to make these bad decisions, right? And you have to be the good girl, and it's like so dichotomous. And so I think I would go like right before that, the shit starts just blowing up, and say 11, 12, and I'm, oh, I have cool ideas too, mom and dad. And they're like, yeah, that's cool, but you're going to do it this way, and you're going to study this, and you're going to behave like this and speak like this, and and value, like, as they're building and instill, well, I don't know if instilling is the word, like trying to instill like their values at the same time where I'm starting to really like, I'm like, this is like really dissonant for me. I'm not really buying all of this. That's where I would start. And I would say, you do have a voice, and in your voice matters. And you get to be the person that you just genuinely are, that you intrinsically are. You're nerdy, you're fun, you're cool all at the same time. You have like, you have creative things you want to do that sometimes parents don't see as valuable. It's not productive. It's not going to make you money. It's not going to give you financial security. It's not going to give you prestige. And so like, I think those things are where we really connect with who we are. And those are the things where, if I'm watching a show or reading like a fun book, and my parents come in, they're like, why are you reading that? You need to study. You need to study your algebra. And I'm like, oh, like, but this book is so good, or
Yeah.
this, and so I think it's at that point where I would jump in and give myself a big old hug.
Yeah.
And that being a whole other thing too, like just, physical touch, and, the nurturing in that way. And so like, just really, you are valued, and you deserve to be nurtured, and you have a voice that is your own, and let's explore what that is, and support.
Yeah.
So
That's a great age to go back, the before all of the hormones and all of the questioning. And it's still quite an observant age, because your brain is at a point where you're a little bit outside of yourself now. You are seeing what's happening, whether it be with your parents or siblings, whoever's in the household. So when you go back and sit with that version of you, what do you remember she was internalizing and observing at the time as an 11, 12-year-old?
it was like things that weren't happening. There weren't conversations about things that there should have been conversations about, or there weren't apologies for dysregulated behavior. It's like, whoa, why is this parent so angry? Or why is that parent so critical? And, people are people, like you said, we're like navigating being the child of immigrants while they are being immigrants, which is like a huge, heavy burden. And it is a sacrifice, and all the things that we hear that are sometimes used in like a guilt inducing way, but those things they're true. We're like, they're having their experience with, they're human. However, it's like, after we've made mistakes, it's like, what is the after with that?
Mm-hmm.
And like, you're absolutely right. Like, I mean, identity formation is happening already. Like, we focus on like the teenage years and really coming into our identity and exploring our identity, but that's already happening. It's just happening in more concrete ways, but that The preteen is like we're moving from concrete to more abstract ways of thinking about self and justice and fairness and all those things. And so like I think that's like it's a very sensitive time for a child too. So I think it's you know, to sure, like there's conflict, but it's like, what are we going to do with it? And that's the in between, the arguments, the in between, the like, oh, like, you have to like look at your cousin, or like look at the girl at church, and oh, she's such a good girl, and and it's like, but can we talk about it a little bit more? Like, what does that even mean to you, mom or
Yeah.
dad, or
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
So I think that part is where
Yeah, I think you laid out the episode so well, because we're going to break some of that down throughout in terms of just exactly how you described, in terms of like, what does that mean to you? But maybe if we fast forward and we put this time machine in future time now. You're a mom, you've raised, your kids are young adults. And so I'm curious what you were internalizing, sort of your own experiences, how that showed up through parenting. Like, what did you choose to maybe do differently with your kids? In that, the in-betweens, as you talk about in particular, of like what didn't happen, the transitions after an argument or blowout or whatever it was that happened. And we're like, what did you not bring or learn from that? And when you started parenting your girls?
I think it was the intentionality and talking about the thing that just happened that was like weird or disruptive, or like, oh, like me and your dad were like arguing about this, and it appeared really big, but it's this giving things meaning when they don't feel, when they feel unsettling, when there's something that hurts. It's what you just witnessed really means this, and giving things context. I think like, missing context was the big thing that was happening. So when that happens, you're left to fill in the blanks and understand in the ways that you will, based on like, I don't know, Bollywood movies, or American shows, or what you hear about how your friends'
Yeah.
household are going, or what so it's like kids create their own narratives. And so rather than like kind of leaving them to their own devices, it's like giving context and like exploring that with them as well. It's like, well, this is what this means. Like, yes, like we were upset with each other, but we love each other. It doesn't mean that we don't. It means that I was really frustrated that that thing wasn't placed where it should be. And that was
Yeah.
like, that's also not a big deal, and just like talking things through,
Yeah.
and giving them the language to talk about things that come up in their life, to encourage them to bring that to me. So I think the biggest thing was to talk about the things that my parents were silent about, and maybe didn't have the language themselves to.
Yeah.
Really.
I think that's such a huge learning for many of us kids, in that making up our own understanding or story. Because, like I interviewed my dad a while ago,
Mhm.
and I remember this was kind of like an aha moment for him. I'm like, my relationship and understanding of like men was through you. Like, you were the first one contact. And he was like, oh yeah, that's so true. And so when you're so in it and just doing it and not able to have time to reflect and process, I think sometimes those marks and those opportunities get missed for a lot of our immigrant parents.
Mhm.
And a lot of us grew up with undiagnosed anxiety, and a huge link to that is that lack of predictability of when these issues are happening in the household, but there's no explanation or understanding. And we shoved under the carpet, there's avoidance, all these things that a lot of kids of immigrants would say happened. Very few would say parents processed after and said, I'm really sorry you had to hear your dad and I. We're okay. As you said, we love each other. This is what I've learned. That kind of thing didn't happen for probably almost all of us. I'd be shocked to hear how many it did happen for. And so we grow up saying, oh yeah, I'm okay. I turned out fine. And it's like, but did we?
Mhm.
Because a lot of us inherited a lot of substance use issues. We tried to tie those difficult moments and kind of manage those gaps of anxiety that we grew up with substances and other things, because we grew up in this like conflict avoidant world, even though conflict was so openly happening before our eyes. So I'm curious if you and your kids ever, now that they're young adults, do you guys ever talk about like what their experience was like growing up with you and your husband? Like, do they share like what they felt was helpful or not?
Yeah. And what you said, so true about just like how we then in our developing that language, I felt like I surely stumbled, had to pick myself back up, and like in terms of like the avoidance and leaning in. So it was this weird dance.
Yeah.
And my girls, they're both girls, and they're like, yeah, like, you just really like, they talk about the suppression, even though like in my mind, I'm like, I have to really lean in and I have to have the conversation. The conversations were about like how they were doing, right? And how they were processing things. But my modeling of expressing myself was, I had to learn over time that like, no, I don't always have to pretend everything's fine. I'm like, okay, like, hey guys, yeah, like pick them up from school. I'm gonna cook and you start your homework and I will help you, blah, blah, blah. And then I go in the bathroom and have this big ugly cry because I'm upset about something. It's like, sure, we don't want to put responsibility onto our children for our emotions, but if something's appropriate, right? And it's like, oh, I'm just like really worried about this person's health or whatever it might be. And you happen to start sobbing. That's a moment for them to learn, oh, like I too can express my emotions. And so I think for them, they really picked up on how much I tried to suppress what I was feeling. But that was also a journey and such a learning experience for me raising children to come to finding a balance between, well, I don't necessarily want to do it like all the way like my parents did, but I also don't want to do all of it in the ways that I'm self-correcting. Like I have to self-correct the self-correction.
It's almost like overcorrecting, because
Yes,
it's like like you don't want your kids to experience. I can relate to that. And the added layer is, we both are in mental health. So you're a psychologist. So you're quote unquote supposed to know all of this stuff. And whether others do it or not, I would imagine you yourself put that pressure on as well. I have all this knowledge. I can help all these clients of mine. So surely I can keep it together and whatnot too. So I think that's so big to be able to share that and to have that kind of conversation. Absolutely. Not only with your kids, but even yourself. Like, hey, okay, I tried to make it better. And I think that's the thing is like our generations that, were the kids of the immigrants, we were overcorrecting in many ways, not only just with us, but when we became parents with our kids. And then now it's like, maybe they'll be the cycle starters, and we were trying to break them because we've only had so many generations of practice to be able to quote unquote nail it, whatever that looks like essentially. So I can relate to that though, like trying to do it different, but then at the same time, they're still going to go to therapy and complain about us like we did about our parents. So it's like, well, you hope that you made a bit of a dent in some ways. And you had said something else too, when you were explaining that, like, just even in the process of not apologizing is what I'd picked up too. So like we grew up in an era where that wasn't really a thing. And I don't even know if that's necessarily just children of immigrants. I think even my husband grew up in an era with his parents, and that generation just had a lot of stoic kind of response, and you had to protect your dignity and you just didn't apologize. Right. And kids were kids and they didn't need it. And so I'm curious, maybe in your personal life, but also in the work you do and the research you're doing, even with like kids of immigrants, what kind of conversations are happening about apologies and maybe not receiving them and what that does for us, or what was helpful about having parents that did apologize? I'm not sure if you get both ends or not.
I think so many so many great directions to go in.
Yeah, I bet.
So I think like, yeah, there's the idea of either following that same pattern of stoicism and like, I'm not going to apologize. And, and you see it like, even like for some of my patients who don't have children or in relationships or in friendships where there is that guardedness, right? Because I think that like, inability to apologize also goes along with guardedness a lot of times where it's like, oh yeah, okay, but we need to move on. Like, sure, I might have, blah, 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 but that's life and we need to move on. And so trying to maintain that, and then you see how problems develop in relationships because of that versus people who like our pattern where we're like over apologizing and then you add to that over apologizing with gender differences and what we're taught, like hetero male versus female roles that we're supposed to abide by. And like, I mean, girls are apologizing for shit we didn't do anyway, like all the time, right? Like growing up, it's like, oh, it's almost not in all households, of course, but in many, I get this sense that girls are kind of in the way. So it's like, oh, I'm sorry. Like, am I taking, even in sessions when somebody's like, oh, like does that make sense, or oh, I'm so sorry, or oh, I keep going on, and I'm like, no, we're not going to be doing that. You can say whatever you want, but you can't say that. And I'll stop people and just that thought stopping and saying, wait, like, why are you saying that? Like, what does it mean to you? Do you feel that you can take up space, right?
Mhm.
And then like staying on the topic of gender roles and apologies or not apologizing, I think there's so much conflict with males that I don't think gets enough attention, where I think males are kind of in this gridlock state sometimes because I'm supposed to know all the things. I'm supposed to be able to handle all the things, but I know that like these are things that I should be apologizing for, but I haven't been given permission because I am a man and I need to carry this responsibility. I think one of the most beautiful things I see is like a sensitive brown man.
Tell me about it.
Beautiful thing because it's like somebody gave you permission to just be a human being and to have your array of emotions. It's like somebody who is able to say, yeah, I am sad, or I am so sorry that I did that. That was my fault. Will you forgive me? I didn't see it growing. Like if my dad apologized as a kid, it was like once or twice. Like he just could not even get himself to, now as he got older, things have changed and he's kind of in this space of apologizing. He's like, oh, I should have done this. I'm like, okay, Dad. Regrets, I guess, too.
Yeah.
People develop wisdom. Oh, they're just like amazing book. Research on happiness and through who is happy, who is not, like at the time they're nearing the end of their life and what all of that looks like and like developmental stages. But that's the thing about it is that, sorry, I'm going up like
No, not at all.
hopefully connected tangent, but
Yes, keep going.
the the factors that really connect to like whether we have regret at older ages, what gives life satisfaction versus regret, and like, oh, I wish I could have, we all have some regrets, but people who are deeply regretful, it's like there were things that just didn't happen earlier in their life, things they weren't given permission to do, or things they made choices about, resentment, avoidance, suppression, repression, so many ways that ultimately what the research came down to, and this was like a longitudinal study over years, was that they weren't given the space to express themselves, and to
Mhm.
really understand themselves. And so I think that like thinking about that research just really rounds out your really wonderful dynamic question.
No, and I love that you brought this up because I think sometimes I had a friend recently say, sometimes you need your bookends, or like, what would 8-year-old me say, or what would 80-year-old me want me to
Mm,
be doing now? And I
mhm,
think a lot of what I'm hearing you say is tied to this teaching many of us, almost all of us as kids of immigrants had, which was this idea of obedience. So you follow the rules, you go to school, you do it well, you get married, you have the job that pays well. And all of this is a sign of respect to giving back to your family that sacrificed, but then also to yourself. And even women today, I'm in the phase of perimenopause. And I think it's so interesting because I think of people like my mom and aunts who didn't have the language behind what they were going through. And a lot of us young women and young men grew up looking at our moms in that phase as crazy women. In fact, even divorces happen in that phase because the guy's like, oh, she went crazy. And so today we have a little bit more understanding of what's happening with hormones. And I think a lot of women in this phase, even before they now hit the elderly age, is holy shit, I've been living a life that was chosen for me. And so when I think of your research that you're talking about, I feel like that's how I would feel if I was at my last stage. And if I had a regret, it would likely be because I did something that other people expected or wanted. And it wasn't truly like the life I wanted for me. And a lot of us grew up around elders that didn't really have the capacity to say what that life they wanted for themselves because they had to just do the thing that they had to do to bring their whole family over and work and that kind of thing. So I think we are now in such a privileged era where even though what's happening around the world and, you know, a way of maybe supporting those that are so oppressed is like, okay, how can I not take advantage of this life that I'm living? And what is joyful? What is like what I want? Because I would imagine there's nothing more critical than being at the end of our stage. If we get to live to the elderly stage and have like a crazy amount. I hope my only regrets is I didn't take enough nudes. Like I honestly hope that's what I'm like at as a 95-year-old woman that's like, man, I wish I had more naked pictures of me out there. Hey, like, but reality is that, you know, there'll probably be a lot of other things in there. So what are those things? And I think part of what you're saying is like, be brave and go do your inner child work and look at the gaps and the things we didn't get so we can work through them. And maybe by the end of our lifespan, we can say, okay, I'm satisfied. And so we're kind of talking about patterns and the inner workings of kids of immigrants. And so before I move to the next kind of area of how it shows up, maybe that we're kind of talking about both of them, but do you see, or even in your research, what are you learning about what are some of those patterns that a lot of kids of immigrants are saying that are coming up again and again for them now as adults, whether it's guilt or this obedience, maybe some other ones?
So guilt turned into tremendous shame. So like, I mean, there's guilt, right? It's, am I functioning up to my parents' standards, first of all, which is like, it really, like, even though everything in them says like, wait, but this is my life, there is still this like, I mean, and these are men and women who are just badass people, right? Very cool, advocating for humanity, doing like amazing, beautiful things for people, for themselves, trying to live their authentic life. But then there's this huge block where they're like, but I feel so guilty because my parents sacrificed so much, and they're like questioning my decisions. And so I have to live by this particular mold. And so they feel guilty because they're letting their parents down, but then that turns into shame. And it's not only am I not doing the things that they are asking me to do or like demanding that I do to make up for the sacrifice, which by the way, like we can never make up for the sacrifice. And so like with that, then when the guilt is internalized, then it's, oh, I'm not good enough. It's not just like what I haven't achieved that they expected isn't good enough, or I have achieved the thing, but I'm not working hard enough in it. I need to work harder. My parents have always said like, work hard if you want to make it in this country. And so it's, I'm not working hard enough. So like, what's wrong with me? Right. And that is so destructive because then it's like their whole being is wrong, is bad, is like, I've even heard the word evil surely disobedient. And what that ends up doing, though, in the end is you think, you do like the fast forward. I love that you're like going through different times in the lifespan, because you fast forward, and the place that people often come to is, man, like I met all the requirements and I am deeply unhappy right now, even though I did all the things that I was supposed to do, that my parents said would bring me success and respect and prestige. But nobody ever talks about the joy, right? And so, like, what do we have if we don't have joy? What do we have if we don't connect with these, what I believe are very God-given or very spiritual things, right? It's like, why do certain people like to write and other people hate writing, but they love to play the sax or whatever? And those are things that bring us joy. So it's like you can work and work and work and get all the degrees and do all the things, but it's like that like dissatisfaction is where I see people typically at that crossroads where they're like, I'm doing all the things and I'm just left feeling unsatisfied with that and feeling like I'm a shitty daughter or son because I still feel like I'm not good enough. And this is how insidious it becomes. It's like the parents sometimes are like, oh yeah, like you did all the things, you did all the requirements, great, right? So they're not even like expressing disappointment, but it's so internalized at that point because the disappointment was the message all the way through. It's why didn't you get A's? Why didn't you get A's? You're getting B's. Or, oh, why are you thinking about taking on that job? You can get a better job at a better company making way more money. So it was never good enough. So even
You've gained weight, you've lost weight, like your partner's too tall, not tall enough, like all these like weird external ways of feeling, apparently to feel acceptance. But you're right, it was all this, like it's so well said what you're saying, it's so ingrained along the way that when you get to your so-called finish line, it's not good enough. And you're right, a lot of times parents are like, oh, I'm so proud that my son's a blah blah blah, or you're doing whatever, and you yourself as the son or the daughter can't be part of that or participate in their joy or their excitement because exactly, that's already been done now.
Exactly. It's their joy. They have received joy from it, but the child is left feeling empty. And it's like everything is so like patterned for us too. It's like you have to have this career, this type of partner, this type of income, and so like when everything is scripted and then you attain it, it's like, now what? So that's like a real paradoxical thing. It's like, okay, I attained all the things, but what am I supposed to do now? And then that sense of identity is also something that becomes very confusing for people in their like mid-20s, 30s. They're like, wait, I don't know what to do with myself. Like I did everything my parents told me to. So like, now what? So they're kind of like very lost.
Yeah.
Then it's about rebuilding identity for real.
Right. And where do you start with that? How do you, as someone who doesn't understand how developmentally appropriate it was as a young teen to be building that identity, and then as in your 20s, in every decade, your identity is evolving. Like some of us have multiple identities because of the layers and the intersections as a woman of color, child of immigrants, all these kinds of things. So how does one, and maybe this is how with patients that you have coming to you, or even in your own experience, like how do you one day realize, or at some point realize, oh, like part of this is me now figuring out what do I want and what brings me joy and who am I outside of these labels? Like where does one even start as an adult if they haven't had that support along the way or understanding of identity along the way because they think their labels are their identity?
Yeah, they think their labels are their identity. So we start to talk about values. What are your real values? What are your true beliefs? I mean, even when we talk about religion, right? There are children, adults, who have just kind of like gone along with their parents' religion because it was forced on them. That's just one example. And then they're like, wait, but I don't even want to I actually don't even know what I believe. I don't know I want to explore what I believe, or I realize I don't believe anything, or there's so much guilt and shame in that too. And like, you can't go and process it with your parents because they were like, oh, like, well, you're going to hell for sure.
Yeah,
You know?
yeah,
And
yeah. Or I am, because I didn't. Parents are like sometimes toddlers. They center themselves in their child's world. So it's like, what are people going to do when they hear this? Like, what are they going to say to me? What's the church or the temple going to say, and the community and all of that stuff?
Mhm.
So it's like they center themselves in their kid's life, and the kid has centered their parent in their life all through adulthood. So I love okay, what are these values that you
Yeah.
believe? And that must be difficult for grown ass adults to like first time ever question that.
Yeah. No, it's very difficult. And when you think about the reactions, like staying with that example of religion, and if you were, hey mom, I don't know if I believe in this idea of, and it's like, oh Jesus, oh, oh God, forgive me. Like,
Yeah.
what did it's like our nervous systems are like, oh my gosh, like I've done something very, very wrong. And so like we have to get to that part of it. What is your nervous system telling you about the dissonance you're feeling between what is your true identity and what is your parents' identity? Which you're absolutely right. It's parents have created their identity and children have supported their parents' identity, really. So there's just with that emptiness, it's like, what are your values? And that can be very uncomfortable for people where they sometimes even like might react to me. And I think that like a lot of that is like transference of why are you saying that? That's because I'm bringing up that guilt and shame they feel that has been internalized, but is not like real. This is really upsetting you right now, right? And it's not because of what I said, it's more of like what they're reacting to, what their bodies and their minds are reacting to, which is years and years of being programmed to only do it in the ways that they are told to do it. So when I'm, yeah, but like, what are your interests? What do you just like intrinsically? And we'll go back in time and I'll say like, what were some like the first things you loved to do? And oh man, I love drawing. And I'm like, what happened? My parents didn't really like, I didn't have time for that because I was studying, or I did it here and there. But then, I mean, some parents even get angry and upset about why are you wasting your time with that? So it's like that creativity, that love for whatever it was, love for wanting to be a teacher, love for wanting to be whatever. No, we only have three professions and you have to be one of those. Everything else sucks. And so that guilt and shame, like breaking that up is breaking up a huge boulder. But when we get to the other side of it, they're able to see, wow, like, yeah, I do have this whole identity that I get to nurture. I get to give myself permission and to attend to and to listen to what I need. That's where we stay for quite some time because then you have either oh, I visited my parents and they really shot down my ideas, this and that, or I live with my parents and I have to contend with it, or my parents are gone, but they're up here. And, I want to take this dance class, but I keep hearing what my dad said about what it means for girls to dance or what
Yeah.
all of these things are being excavated. And so it's like to be able to see through all the fog of what we have been taught and to break apart those messages to then create identity, to connect with values. So it's like there's a lot of push and pull to,
Mm-hmm.
oh, let's go this way. And they're like, no, but my parents said it's not even that. It's more subconscious.
Yeah.
Sometimes, oh, that's interesting that you didn't pursue that. Why do you think that is? And so
So can I ask, like, why would a child of immigrants who's a grown up now, why would they want to do this work? Because I have
mm,
people that will push back and say, I'm fine. Like, that's not how it is. And have all these other kind of responses. And from the outside, I'm like, no, you're leaking in many ways and you're not happy. And your health isn't well, all these other things. And for a lot of them, it's like, this is the way it is. Or they, like you said, their parents are gone and they want to be so connected to their parents still. And there's all these kinds of reasons why people choose to continue to do what they're doing. And so when someone has the opportunity, like you or me, to go through this process to figure out, okay, like, who am I outside of these things? Why would they want to do that? What would be the motivating factor? Because it sounds painful in many ways. It sounds like, I don't have time for this.
Yeah.
And all of the other reasons that some people would maybe say, that's not for me. That's wishy-washy, or whatever they would think. Why would we want to encourage them to go there?
Because these things that we hold, they're like wounds that are festering, but they're like an internal wound, right? And we don't see them and we don't feel them until they're just too big. And now it's like, oh, something really, really hurts. I don't know what it is, but it's there and it's affecting me and I can't name it. But like everything else is fine, right? Like my job is fine and my relationships are fine. But there are ways that, like you said, they're leaking. This wound is like affecting relationships. They may not see it, but they know that something is amiss, something is off. Maybe they can't connect with people in the ways that they would love to. And they're like, people just don't get me, or like, I don't know why, but I don't lean into relationships, or everybody is, and giving some blanket statement about what everybody is. But it's really what those first relationships were. Their relationships are guarded, maybe. Their relationships are wrought with suspicion. Oh God, we can have like a whole year of talking about how suspicious immigrant families are, immigrant parents, right? And then we adapt that. Whatever the thing is, like whatever the wounds are, and they're a little different for everybody, but they're happening. And until that's taken out and examined and it's treated, it's only going to grow, right? So every area of life starts to deteriorate, and you're left asking yourself, like, well, why is this happening? Why is my life going this way? And so it's like, there has to be healing that comes. And yes, like what you said earlier, I've heard many times where people are like, oh, but I'm fine and it's over. I moved out, I have a job, and I have this, or I have a that, and whatever. Just because we physically separate ourselves doesn't mean that all of that, those first relationships aren't within us, right? And we're carrying them, and they continue to show up in different ways. So we all have a choice to either continue to suppress when something pops up, or to say, okay, this is a pattern for me, or this is something that continues to come up. And the why of it, like, why do something so painful? Yes, it's a wound. We have to remove it and examine it. But also, it's like, if we think about how much emotional and mental energy we have, it's not this forever, and we don't have an endless amount of mental and emotional energy. It runs out. And so if so much is given to the things that have happened in the past, we only have a little bit to give in the present, right? And so it's a matter of coming to realize that.
Yeah. If you think of like our energy bar, and eventually, like, if we don't plug ourselves in and do this work to recharge, we do burn out. And I agree that we spend so much expensive energy trying to suppress and tuck it away and not go there, then when we do go there, in the lightness that comes out afterwards and managing, like, none of our past, even in the best work we ever do, goes away, but we learn how to make sense of it. We learn how to better our relationships. And I've been thinking a lot about this too. And I'm like, we come from the kind of community that is such a collective. And those of us that really do care about what our parents think and what our community thinks, I think maybe we start shifting it in a way of, well, we want to leave the community in a better place when we go. And this is all research and good work for the next generation and the next generation. Because as a South Asian community and a lot of the BIPOC communities, our bar is so low because of our intergenerational traumas and how our countries were colonized and all these kinds of things, that when we are kind of just at level 1 starting to do the work, and you think of the Western world and how self-actualized many of them can be or are, and how they're doing. And I think it's just time to kind of also raise the bar. So sometimes it's not even about us as individuals when we do the work, but it's like, what's the message? What's the process we want to leave for the next generation? And if we're parents, I think we have a responsibility there then to try to do something a little bit better than how it was done. And that doesn't mean our parents are the worst people.
Right.
It just means it's like technology, right? Where technology was in the 80s is different than the 90s and where it's at now. And we kind of have to progress and grow with it, whether we want to or not. And so I appreciate what you're saying about that. Like it makes sense to go there. And I think something else you were saying that you highlighted as well is when we are parenting, and this is something like I do with my kids, and I realize this is what didn't happen for me, is a lot of times as kids of immigrants, as you had mentioned, the sacrifice. So our parents will use that to their advantage sometimes of like, I did this for you, or I'm doing this for you. And we grow up and we don't realize, maybe until we have our own kids, that parents have a responsibility to provide basicness. And a lot of us get punished or treated like, you better appreciate that I'm providing the basicness of parenting. So I remember one day my youngest son was thanking me for driving him to hockey practice. And he's like, thanks, Mom. Thank you so much for driving me. And it kind of clicked for me. And I was like, look, I appreciate that you appreciate me, but this is my role. Like, I'm your mom and I am here to take you to these things. I'm your mom. My kids, I appreciate the manners for thanking me for doing the basic things, but I do go back and remind them, like, also, like, this is my joy too. Like, I chose to be your mom and it's my choice to make you food or do these things for you. And a lot of us didn't get that. A lot of us got, you better appreciate every single thing. And so then we grow up and we're confused about that too. And I think that seeps into like the identity building as well, because like you said, we're always apologizing because it came out that way, and you better be grateful for every single thing. But it's like, no, it's your job to provide me safety. Like sometimes I have to remind myself and go talk to little me about, no, that was their job. It was their job to make sure food was at the table, whatever the food was. I mean, they did the best for that, but that's not something that I had to be so grateful for. And so then, when we're managing the guilt, I think that's where some of that seeps through, because we're like, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. And it's like, no.
Yeah, like just making ourselves really, really small and like, you're feeding me. And it's like, well, if you didn't, I would die. So,
right.
Like, yes, like, and there's like the gratitude part of, oh, like, thank goodness, like my parents fed me. Thank goodness they did these things. That is different than being guilted into being grateful for it, right? And everything is more about, well, why did you do this to us? Why are you doing this to me? Why are you having me waste this food? And I worked so hard. Like, like those, like, again, nervous system, how our nervous system is like screaming all the time. And so I have to manage that. And your question of, so why should anybody lean into all of this? Like, it's a hard process. It doesn't sound fun at all, ever. And in the work we do, we know we're sitting with people in their pain. And sometimes, yes, we just, that's what we do. It's like, we just have to sit and we have to wait and we have to understand what this is for you. But all the while, like, yes, it's impacting generations. Absolutely. What you said, like, you're impacting the future, you're impacting the now in terms of emotional health, but you're also impacting physical health and mortality rates. We have Indians living in America don't do well with this like nervous system being revved up all the time. We have things that are medical conditions for Americans show up differently for us, and there's more sudden illness because we just because of the history, how we ate, and the multiple famines and the climate. I mean, there are so many reasons why people come to other countries, wherever we're going as families, but there's that stark difference in all the things where like mortality rates are affected, where we really have to be conscientious of how am I doing physiologically as well, which is why I just really focus heavily on mind and body. And what is your body telling you when you think of, oh man, like my parents sacrificed so much for me and now I'm a failure or I'm failing? Or first of all, is that even accurate? And challenging those ideas, but also what is your body telling you about that? Like, why are you, like, the exhaustion that happens and the mental drain that happens where decision making becomes very difficult. And these are the type of things people are coming in for. They're like, I don't know, like something's happening where I'm having a hard time making decisions, or I just feel really tired all the time. My doctor, my medical doctor recommended me to see you. So it's coming out in symptomology, not in, oh man, like you are so just, you have been so programmed to feel really, really terrible about yourself, a lot of times inadvertently by parents, right?
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
Sometimes very advertently. There is like a subset of parents who are highly narcissistic also. So like, I mean, that's a whole other conversation, but even talking about what the patterns are, but then that additional layer of parents suffering from mental illness, from personality issues, personality disorders, who are then also adding to the generational patterns and the generational trauma that's happening. Just the noticing and the presence and just giving permission to ourselves that we get to attend to our bodies and our minds. So like there were so many things that were happening in my body that I started to, like, when I would hear from my American friends about how in tune they were with their bodies,
Mm.
I'm like, oh, I never thought about that with my body. I never thought about questioning the pain I was experiencing, or oh, I just have to deal with it and keep going. Like I just have to, and so like even how we pick up those signals in our bodies is so important, because often our bodies are giving us information even before our minds do. And
So true.
it's like we're just, that disconnect has recreating that. And when we think about historically how we were so aligned with Ayurvedic medicine and how like energy sits in our bodies, and so many beautiful ways of attending through mind and body that have been lost.
Yeah. I'm so glad you brought that up, because I think that we see our community accessing medical support a lot quicker and
Mhm.
more often than mental health support. And medical is easier to treat because you can feel it, you can see it, but mental health can, like you said, you got to dig a little bit, you got to be attuned. But how many of our elders or our siblings, our relatives, whether they're older, same age, have a lot of physical symptoms showing up, breaking out in rashes, having some kind of autoimmune chronic disorder, need surgery on a part of the body. All these things are not just showing up randomly, and it's not just, well, this is to be expected because I'm aging.
Right.
There's a lot of other layers to it, as you're saying, and I think you're right, we do owe it to look into that, because we're medicating ourselves a lot with high doses and what to suppress and suppress and suppress. And it's seeping out and coming through. And then that is being taught to the next generation and the next generation. So I'm really glad that you brought that up, because we do see that, and it's easier to like notice, like, oh, my wrist hurts, so
Mhm.
I got to tend to that. But like, why?
Mhm.
Why my wrist? Why my arm? Where is this all coming from? It is the body telling us, hey, you better figure something. I'm giving you a heads up before
Mhm.
I give you a permanent rest or whatever it is that, it does. So
Yeah.
yeah.
So,
Yeah. So I feel like today's conversation has been so helpful on so many levels of like validation, encouraging to like be curious about, okay, as a human, where do I sit in this? And what's my role to visit the past and the future? And what am I doing in the present? I think a lot of your knowledge today that you've shared has helped, and I know will help a lot of our listeners and followers in like, maybe I fit somewhere in this. And so the thing that I'm probably already regretting the most is that I should have just booked you for 6 more follow-up recordings because I think there's so much more. And you said it a couple times. That's a whole different conversation, whole different. So I think there's a lot more to this. We're just kind of opening the door to the topic of us, BIPOC community members, child of immigrants that are wondering as adults, like, where's this coming from and what do I want to do about it? So maybe I can ask you to come back again and we can talk a little bit more about it in segments or in depth as your research continues as well. And we didn't really even get to go to the interracial stuff too. So I wonder if there's an opportunity for us, and that's okay. You know what? I'm a big believer of letting a conversation, as you know, as you're a psychologist, so you would know this better than me, letting it go where it's meant to go and knowing that it's one of many more conversations to be had. And so I think we'll visit some of these topics. Maybe I can bring you back, but maybe in this moment, I can invite you to do a middle fingers up segment so you could share something you want to put your middle fingers up. Maybe it's related to what we were talking about. Maybe it's something completely different that's on your mind that you didn't get a chance to share.
I think it's like I have one, and I think about this a lot. It's kind of like the underbelly of like all of what we talked about, and that is caste. It's like the whole caste system and how it functions. How it has functioned in India, how it has spread to other countries, how the playbook for so many ugly things that have happened in other countries have been taken from the caste system. And when we think about like why we even have these messages, why, our parents are like, you have to work really hard and it's like this like land of opportunity, the land of milk and honey. It's almost like, hey, we're in a country where we don't have to necessarily worry about the caste system as we did. It's like everybody's on the same playing field. But then you come here and realize there is a whole other type of caste system here, right? And this like hierarchical, racial, socioeconomic. And so, caste can look like many different things, but it's just such a driving force, I think, for the suffering of immigrant parents, children of immigrants, and like generations going forward, that really connecting those things is vital. It is so vital. And even as we're seeing like a lot of things that are happening in the media coming from the mouths of South Asian people who hold power and really aligning with what they believe to be like the highest level of power and authority and stepping on the rest of us because of it. It's like big F you to caste and really putting it out there and calling it what it is and like how it relates to all of the systemic pain that so many people suffer from. So it's like, yeah.
I am with you. I love that you like you said, the underbelly, because we talked about a lot of what you've said before with other guests, but we haven't called it as, okay, like where's the root of this? Where's this coming from? And there's so many different ties to like, even in our conversation today, we didn't really get into the patriarchal misogyny, like these other systems that even the model minority, why there's the 3 careers that we've all been, told that we have to do. And so at the intersection of all that, what ends up happening is our own community is getting in the way of itself because we're creating such a divide within each other of, I'm going to side with the people at the top who really don't care about me, but this is going to help me because it's about the economy, whatever they think. But it is impacting all of us, how we treat new immigrants that are coming in, students. I mean, I don't know how that is in the US, but in Canada, it's a huge thing. And we've had immigrants come in from the Ukraine, and because they're white and they look white, we don't often hear about them. We specifically hear about the BIPOC immigrants that look outside of the Western norms. And so all of that stuff, when our own community starts siding with that in North America here, whether it's Canada or US, we're definitely not disrupting, but we're more so becoming, aligning. And it's sad because it's impacting us. We're trying to thrive as a community. We got a lot of other shit on our agenda that we got to deal with. So I agree with you that it's beast that we need to kind of come together and work towards instead of having this hate. And if you have a suggestion or one thing we could each think about to overcome this or work on this or fight this?
I think for me, it always goes back to listening. What is a person's story? And that brings so much unity rather than like, oh, can I place this person in this box or that? Oh, they're on that level. So, because the thing is like tying it all back to what we were talking about with, you mentioned model minority, and that's really like what we try to attain, what our parents, that pressure that they've placed to attain. But we also have like such a large part of the South Asian immigrant and BIPOC population where people are not attaining that.
Yeah.
And like, what is that? What does it mean for them? So I have, both ends of it, people are suffering, whether they attain the things that they're expected to, or being the people who are, I haven't had the opportunity to attain that, or it's just not what I've done, but I still am not accepted. So like hearing people's stories rather than, oh, you're from this area, or you have this much money or whatever. It's like hearing people's stories because there are so many threads of similarities because we are human. And so even like how people label people as aliens, it's like, like that's just another way to dehumanize.
Yeah,
There's many ways
separate
we
yourself.
dehumanize, and we're able to say that person deserved what happened to them. And like people are like, whoa, like psychologically, how is it possible for people to excuse things what happened to George Floyd and like, oh, but he like stole something or wrote a bad check or whatever. It's that man did not deserve to. Nobody who writes a bad check or whatever deserves death.
Yeah.
He was every ounce of human that everybody else is. So I think, sharing stories and getting to know people, like going outside of comfort zone. And I don't know if I mentioned this to you, but I did a TEDx talk on this. Like, how do you change the narrative of inequity when you're on two sides of an issue? You're on two sides, even political stances. It's like people, oh, I'm not talking to that person who's from that political party, but it's like sometimes that's what's needed. And it's so very difficult to do at times, admittedly. I mean, because that's difference, but it's like there is a thread. Oh, I wish I could remember the name of the man who he was a Black man who befriended someone from the Klan. Uh,
Oh,
and it's a phenomenal story because it's like you think, how does that even happen? Uh,
yeah.
but
Yeah. I feel like I've heard this too, but definitely something to go back and look into. And I think just the example in itself, yeah. How do you put yourself in that person's shoes when maybe they are harmful? But I think the thing you said was taking the time to understand the story behind the human being, and instead of categorizing these
Mhm.
people look this way, so they must be this way.
Mhm.
There's a lot in that for all of us, a lot of learning in that for all of us. So I love that. I think that's a great lesson. Patty, is there anything that you wish today that we like did uncover, or that you want to go back and maybe even just like add to or whatever before we wrap up our conversation?
I think like the big quick thing that I would just re-emphasize is really being attuned with our bodies as well as our minds. That's just something that we don't like to honor ourselves, to value ourselves. It's like valuing holistically what our experience is everything. But yeah, other than that, like the guilt piece, like that is so big, and we can continue the conversation. I would love to come
Oh,
back
I
on.
like that. Okay.
Uh,
Yes. Yes.
but yeah, lots of things bouncing around in my head. But like I think one other that you mentioned too was like just opening up conversation about what it looks like to be in an interracial relationship. And you had asked me something earlier about raising children and what they picked up about like how I function. And it's like there's that part, and then there's the two cultures coming together and the ways which and I'm just kind of thinking this out loud right now, but I think about it often. Like I've thought about it often in my marriage about how you become this like ambassador for interracial relationships. You become the fierce protector of that. But then I think the other side of it is that you minimize some of the difficulties. Like for me, I felt like I am the ambassador, I'm the anti-racism ambassador in my, Indian, Christian, conservative community that just like sees things in a box when it comes to like race. And my husband's Black, and it's like that was just like, oh my gosh, like at least he could have been white, and we don't do that. And there were so many negative anti-Black messages that were so disgusting, and like that caused me to almost want to prove to the community this thing is going to work and you're going to see, because people were like, months into getting married, I bumped into somebody who was at my wedding, and she was like, oh, where do you live? I'm like, well, I live, in this town. And she's like, oh, with your family? Did you move back in here with your family? I'm like, no. Oh, your sister? I'm like, with my husband. She's like, oh, I heard you got divorced.
Oh, wow. Look at
So
that.
I think the idea was like already that it was going to happen, that it was inevitable. And so I think we're trying to navigate this like role of being children of immigrants. And then like some of us get involved in interracial relationships, and you think about like the cultural aspects, you think about just the many levels, just the
Yeah. And like for you, you're in a true, because there's a lot of conversation about what is interracial. Like some people wouldn't even say is interracial because I'm with a white person, and so there's a power differential there. So as a white person, right, that's not the racial part. The racial part is he's with the brown person. For you, two minority races coming together, that there's so many different layers to your relationship that you two would have to battle. And then having two daughters in the States that are half Black, half brown, that in itself, those two have to navigate and work through as they get older. And what, again, like geographically where they're from in the States is going to be part of a whole different experience for them than maybe my kids and where they are in Canada. But still, they have to navigate this sort of world. And so I can imagine that I agree with you in that needing to prove all these kinds of different things that have come up for myself and other people that I know like me that married outside of being South Asian. And even, people that are Sikh being married to a Muslim. And so like all these different things, because every community has a lot. And I remember that too. Like the worst thing you could do was be with a Black person. And I never understood that as a kid, and none of it made sense. But these things were always thrown out within our families and our communities. And so and again, we go back to 11, 12-year-old you're internalizing all these things. Like, what does that even mean? And those of us that question the questioning, right, grow up being like, okay, this is also us assimilating to a Western society and being taught that, again, one race is worse than the other, so we can all be divided. But I bet you and your husband had to work through. I mean, I bet he also had that on his end too, as a Black man. I would imagine, I don't know what his family or community would say about him marrying a brown woman. Was there talk about that in the same way for you in marrying a Black man?
I feel like it didn't come with that level of hatred and that like level of ignorance that comes with it. It was like more, his mom was like, well, you better be serious about her because her family is not good. And she understood like the gravity of it, but also like messages, well, none of my kids married Black people, and like things like that, and like the disappointment of that.
Yeah.
So like you could feel it in ways that weren't said, definitely, but generally loving and welcoming of me.
But like you said, you still feel it. There's still isolation because you're both showing up at events and things, and neither of you look like the other people whose event that you're. So there's so much, and the stares and all these kind of things. And I know for me, being with a white person, I would say would be my generation's way of survival. My parents had their sacrificing, and then a lot of young people like me ended up with white people. So A, we could hide behind the white culture. B, we assimilate hard. I gained a lot of points being with a white guy. So because I was a cool brown chick, and I really fell into that trap. And so a lot of my friendships were because I was with a white man. But because I also didn't, I connected more with the North American, the Western white supremacy kind of way as well. Like, so I had to grow up in unlearning all of that in my 40s of like, what the heck is all of this bull crap? And so our experiences being in these relationships, I look back and I'm like, I wonder what it would have took for me to grow up in the way I would have needed to have been able to say to my husband, do you know what it's like to date a woman of color? Because I would have never 25 years ago thought about asking him that kind of a question in the way now we prepare our kids and we have these conversations when we meet new friends and it's like, do you know what it's like to be friends with a person of color? Because it's a lot of layers, and right? So I think like we grow, we learn, we do these things. But I mean, now for you and I, a lot of it has to do less about us and more about our kids and the world that they're venturing off into. So I would imagine you guys have a lot. So like you do need to come back, because I think we need to like pause this and have another conversation about, right? Like being in these different relationships, and maybe my kids are still young, but they might have something to say. Maybe your daughters, you can ask them a couple of questions and represent them in our future conversation of like what they would say about watching mom and dad coming from a different race as well. Yeah. My kids are protective of the brown side more so because they know it's easy to be white, but they really watch how I get treated out in public. And they ask a lot of questions, and I really, really respect them for understanding that too, because they could have it they could look at it in all different ways. So I think we should do this again.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It was wonderful.
I just want people to know where they can find you, because you pose a lot of good questions, invite a lot of community conversation, and maybe other people that are listening today can be part of your research for your upcoming book. So where can people find you on socials and connect with you?
So on my website is a great like central place where I have like other things I've written. I have a book of essays that I did on different things about culture and people asking, what are you? My books are there, and I write about different aspects relating to all of what we talked about. And then, so that website is www.pjtemple.com, which is more like my pen name. And then I'm on Instagram. I'm kind of like everywhere now. Like I'm navigating all of the social media worlds to see what I like best, I think.
Yeah. Are you on TikTok as well?
TikTok. Yep.
Damn, you're brave. Good for you.
Yeah. It's like it wasn't fun at first, but it's more fun now.
Okay. That's promising.
You can't beat them.
Yeah. Join them.
But yeah, I'm on Instagram at PJ Temple7, where I'm kind of like sharing glimpses of like the books I've written as well as the one I'm working on, and a lot of the themes are similar. Where I have a memoir that I've written, which aligns with the nonfiction book relating to like guilt in South Asian communities and building our identity despite it. And then I have a fiction work that is more just like low key, but is along the same theme. So it's like same theme in memoir, nonfiction, more like self-help, and then sci-fi fiction.
So like for every genre, everyone that likes all the different kinds of parts of the bookstore, they can find you, which is amazing. I love that. Yeah,
so
that's awesome. Well, we'll have that in the show notes as well. And I encourage people to go check out Patty's work. Really insightful questions. And you kind of are building a really cool community because of people's responses back and the invitations you have. And I'm looking forward to this book that you're the Child of Immigrants book that you're working on, and the data you're collecting. I'm looking forward to it, because we need more stuff like this for ourselves to process. So thank you for putting yourself out there and doing the work.
Yeah. And thank you so much for inviting me. Like this was really, it's always beautiful to be able to talk about these things and to just destigmatize. It's like, there's so much work toward that has to happen. So like you're just creating this platform, Karen, is just, it's wonderful. So
I appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.